Met fans, welcome to another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel the Towers, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, t.org. I'm John Arezzi, and joining me, and I'm sure happy to be back home in Florida, is the former skipper of the New York Mets, former manager of the Angels and Astros, an analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, and one of the most respected men in the game, Terry Collins. Terry, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. It's good to be back. We're going to have a fun show today. But I tell you, my weekend in New York, you can't ask for better weather than I just went through. I'm down here in Florida where it's 92 degrees and 92% humidity. We have a beautiful weekend in New York, but it's good to be back and good to get our show back on the air.
And you're getting right back to the golf course, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
As you're back. Absolutely. Well, we're back for another show, and coming on today, you do have another baseball lifer, dear friend of yours. So tell us who we got coming up on Talking with TC.
When I came to the Dodger organization, there was always a guy, because being from Michigan. This guy was from Michigan, and I kind of saw him pitch when I was real young, and then I got to be be around him with the Dodger organization. Phil Regan, who's got tremendous career, started in 1956 and ended 2 years ago. 67 years or something in the game. Managed, pitching coach, scout, 27 years in winter ball. I mean, tremendous stories. Known as the Vulture. He's going to tell us how he got that nickname. So one of the great legends of the game, and I'm honored and thrilled to have him on.
Yes, I can't wait for that. That'll be a good one. What a rich history he's got, and I'm sure there'll be some great stories. Well, let's get into the leadoff, Terry. It seems like it's one step forward, two steps back for the Mets right now. In the middle of this another road trip to the West Coast, they split an important series with the San Diego Padres this weekend, lost a heartbreaker on Sunday. They're now 3 games behind the Braves for the third wild card spot, 6 games behind the Padres for the second spot, and 7 games behind the Diamondbacks, who they got an important 3-game series with this week. They seem like they're running in place, Terry, stuck in neutral, but the other teams are putting their foot on the accelerator. Are we at the time now where each game takes on a much more urgent tone, and what type of collective pressure does it put on a team?
John, those are great questions. First of all, it's the big leagues, and so there's no easy games. I mean, I know the Mets are going to play the White Sox, who have a horrible record, but we also watched the White Sox beat up the Yankees last week, so anybody can win. But you know what? It's still playoff time. You're still in the pennant race, so the fatigue issue really doesn't set in. And I've said this and I watched it. I witnessed it. The real good teams in part of August through September, they beat you. They beat you because they went out every night knowing that every night meant something. So their focus had to be better than yours. And everybody's reaching the same part of the game where maybe they're getting a little fatigued. But when you're in a pennant race, that energy, that adrenaline that you have is part of every night. It's part of it every day. And so I know they're having they win some close games, they lose some close games, but they still got a long way to go. You're talking 30 games now, 30 games left. Go 20-10. You take your chances. Finish 15 games over 500. You win 20 more games. You got 86, 87 wins. And by the way, that's qualified for a lot of wild card time. So, and you don't have to say, well, we got to win 25 or 30. Maybe you do, but you got to go out right now and whatever happens tonight, hopefully you win. But if you lose, you have to forget it. I don't care what happens, because you got tomorrow as another meaningful game. And I would tell you, that's the fun part of being a pennant race, showing up every day where those games mean something.
Yeah, and when you take a look at the Mets' schedule, Terry, we were talking about this before we started taping. The schedule doesn't get any easier for New York as well. I mean, they're going to finish up this road trip against the Chicago White Sox. You said they did run over the Yankees recently, but then you get home against the Boston Red Sox, who are still in it. And then in September you play the Toronto Blue Jays, and they're getting hot for the first time this season. So Cincinnati coming up, then the Phillies, You got a few games with Atlanta at the end of the season, 3 games in Atlanta. You finish up against Milwaukee. So this schedule is not getting easier for the Mets. So it's time to step it up. And like you said, the adrenaline has got to be there every game. They're in the pennant race. They're 3 games back in the third wild card. They're still alive. So there's always hope if you're still alive.
Yeah, and you have to maintain that hope, John. You can't get down now. This is not the time. Matter of fact, this is the time when you really got to lean on your veteran players to step it up, to bring the best out in it. Because, at this time, and especially with the game today where there's no longer this massive bringing up of minor league players in the September call-ups. I would think you can only bring up two or 3 guys now. And so you're still going to have to rely on your veteran players, and they're the ones who are going to have to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and speaking of those veteran players, 2 guys in the Mets lineup don't ever get days off. I mean, they play every single day. I'm referring to Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso. Let's talk about Lindor first. He continues to have a monster season. He just won Player of the Week in the National League, and he's garnering lots of MVP talk right now, offensively, defensively, the chemistry on the field. He's doing remarkable plays. He's hitting from both sides of the plate. Is there a better shortstop in baseball right now? And does he have a legitimate shot to possibly be an MVP?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's a better shortstop in the game. This guy does everything you want your shortstop to be, and that's a leader. He's a leader in the clubhouse. He's a leader on the field. He plays tremendous defense. He's going to win another Gold Glove playing shortstop. He's going to hit 30-some homers. He's going to drive in 100 runs. And so if he's not a legitimate MVP candidate, they don't make him anymore. And yes, I know there's other guys having big years, but this guy plays every day, and he doesn't DH. He goes out there and he beats his legs up on a daily basis. And especially right now, he can't come out of the lineup. You don't have time to give him days off at this time of year. So for me, Francisco is a legitimate candidate. He's going to get a lot of votes. I'm not saying he's going to be the MVP, but if he's not, he's going to be in the top 3 for sure.
Yeah, and he plays with such enthusiasm, and he's actual he's joyful every single game. So we love watching Francisco and how he's playing the game. And we're going to get to another player, Pete Alonso. Let's get to Pete. He had a quiet series against San Diego this past weekend. His overall numbers, Terry, 27 home runs, OPS is 799, both pacing down from his career stats. He just seems really quiet. He just doesn't seem like the same guy that we've seen in previous seasons. What have you observed about Alonso this year in comparison to the previous seasons that you've watched him?
Well, if you go back and watch him through the past few years, he really, really enjoys playing, really loves to play. He's one of those guys, actually, he's celebrating. He's having a great time every day. And right now, and again, it's no fault of Pete's, but the pressure on him because it's in his walk year, and there's pressure on putting up big numbers so he can get a huge contract, which I think he's going to get anyway, no matter where it's going to be, because he is a run-producing guy. But I think he wants to stay in New York. I think he's, put a little pressure on himself. He's one of the greatest kids you'll ever be around. And he's just, and he's a human being. He expects a lot of himself. And because he's not playing up to what everybody expects and probably what he expects, he's probably a little down about it. That he knows that, hey, he's got to step it up a little bit. And instead of just being able to relax and going out and doing his thing, he's just adding, for me, a little bit more pressure than he needs to on himself. But that's what stars do. They expect to be the guy that gets it done in certain spots. And when you don't, sometimes they beat themselves up mentally. And I hope Pete bounces out of it, because they're going to need him here in this last month.
Yeah, he's going to be a critical piece of the last month of the season. And there were times when he carried his team on his back, and we've seen it. And we hope that September he gets that fire. And, all it takes, as you know, Terry, is a couple of good hits, clutch hit here, then it carries through. So everybody in New York loves Pete, and we want him to finish off strong and get the best contract he can have. And hopefully it'll be with the New York Mets, because he's such a big part of that organization. So we hope he catches fire in that last month. Terry, we have another big announcement from Tunnel to Towers Foundation. The 3-time Grammy Award winners, the Zac Brown Band, will headline the Post Tunnel to Towers 5K run event on Sunday, September 29th in New York City. That's a big announcement. TC, are you familiar with the Zac Brown Band?
I am familiar with the Zac Brown Band. I've listened to their music. I was actually, when I was managing, they had a huge concert at Citi Field, which I was dying to go to, but we were not there at the time. So I'm actually I'm going to run the race. I hope I'm not too tired that I can't hear the concert when the race is over.
Are you saying you are running the race?
Yeah, I'm going to run it, and I'm looking forward to it. And but it's now I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be all geeked up. I hope I finish by the time the concert starts.
Wow, that's great. That's very cool. I love Zac Brown Band. I mean, Chicken Fried, one of their first big hits, just a classic. Colder Weather, Goodbye in Her Eyes. So Zac Brown Band appearing. And now join TC. Registration is now open for the run. Join the tens of thousands of participants, including first responders, cadets, members of America's military, and veterans by going to t2t.org and registering now, and join TC at the big run in benefit for Stephen Siller from the Tunnel to Towers. And that is the Tunnel to Towers name was founded because of Stephen Siller. There's another big event taking place for Tunnel to Towers. It's the Heroes Cup, taking place Saturday, September 14th. First responder hockey teams from across New York will be in the whole New York area. Actually, we're competing for that cup at the Menon Arena in Morristown, New Jersey, and proceeds will benefit Tunnel to Towers. And we will be back with This Week in Mets History as we wrap up the leadoff after this word from Pete Alonso for Tunnel to Towers.
Tunnel to Towers helps so many people. As a player of the Mets, I feel like for me, I have a responsibility to give back, especially to a cause that's authentically New York. And I just want to show appreciation for those brave men and women who really do a massive service, not just in New York, but everywhere. Hey, I'm Pete Alonso. Let's go Mets, and let's help the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Go to t2t.org for more information about how your donation can make a difference.
Okay, Terry, let's check out This Week in Mets History on August 24th, 2015. In a 16-7 victory over the Phillies in Philadelphia, David Wright makes his return to the lineup in his first game since April the 14th. In his first at-bat, Wright hits a moonshot of a home run, which could be, which later was joined by home runs by Juan Lagares, Wilmer Flores, who hit 2 that game, Travis d'Arnaud, Michael Kadire, Daniel Murphy, and Yoenis Cespedes. 8 home runs that day, sets a Met franchise record. Terry, how important was it to have the Mets captain back in the lineup for that team's pennant chase in 2015? And what was your reaction when the captain hit that massive home run?
Well, John, I've told the story. I probably told it on one of the other podcasts. That David came back, and obviously we missed David. Even though we were playing very, very well at the time, we got all the additions that we've already talked about so often. But when David came back on that day, he walked into my office in Philadelphia when he got to the park and came in. I said, "Man, it's good to see you." And I'm so happy to be back. And so he said, "Skipper, I got to tell you, I know you're playing good." And he said, I don't want to disrupt anything. He said, "I'm only here to help. So whatever I can do to help you, I will. But don't think you have to play me because I know you're playing good." And I said, "Well, let me tell you, big boy, you're hitting third today. That's how important you are to this team to have you back here. You're hitting third." And he walked up in that first at bat and hit this home run. And I looked at Kevin Long, our hitting coach. I said, "Captain America, only he could do that." And everybody on the bench, they really shook their head and said, "Of course he hit a home run." I mean, because that's who he was. And it was unbelievable what it did for the rest of the ball club to have him back at that day.
Yeah. And one of the highlights of that year for sure, which was filled with highlights. On August the 23rd, 2019, en route to his second consecutive NL Cy Young Award, Jacob deGrom accomplishes something that no other pitcher in the modern era had done before. In a start against the Atlanta Braves, deGrom strikes out 13 batters, hits a home run. It was the second time deGrom had done this in 2019, so no other pitcher had two such starts in a season up until that point. Terry, I miss deGrom and watching him take the ball. Injuries aside, where do you place deGrom in comparison to the other great pitchers you had a chance to manage during your career?
Well, I did, John. You're right. I've had a lot of great pitchers, but, and I didn't have the Jake deGrom you were talking about. I mean, he didn't throw 100 when he was with me. But he was one of the consummate competitors that I have ever been around. Nobody it started a game, and you knew you were going to get everything he had that night. He knew how to use different pitches. Even nights that he didn't have as good fastball, he didn't make mistakes with it. He worked the corners, and he used his slider a little bit more effective, or his changeup. And then there were nights where he couldn't have his slider or his curveball. So you know what? He didn't stop using it. He just threw it in certain counts where he wasn't going to get hurt by it. Didn't leave it on the plate. He could pitch. He competed. And so I always said, when this guy got he started throwing 100 miles an hour, I wasn't surprised by anything. And I miss Jacob deGrom. I miss watching him. I loved him as that kind of a pitcher. I loved him with the way the kind of pitcher that he was when he was with me. Clubhouse guy, funny, enjoyed having a great time off the field, enjoyed his teammates, loved him. The Mets miss him. The Mets miss him in that clubhouse, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just saw some video of him. He's thrown again. He's getting ready to get back, it seems, in that last month of the season. We wish him the very best. He was certainly, in my history watching the Mets, one of the greatest pitchers I've ever seen, and we hope he continues those winning ways when he gets back on the mound. You can check out Mets history anytime on social media by going to @NYMHistory on both X and Instagram. And now it's time for Talking with TC. Our special guest today on Talking with TC is a dear friend of Terry's, with a friendship going back many, many years. He's a former big league pitcher, pitching from 1960 to 1972. He was an all-star in 1966 when he also won NL Reliever of the Year and Comeback Player of the Year. He managed the Baltimore Orioles. He coached from 1984 through 2019. Stops along the way included the Mariners, the Indians, the Cubs, the New York Mets. A true baseball lifer. Let's say hello to Phil Reagan. Phil, welcome to Talking with TC.
Thank you. Good to be here this morning. Good to see TC again. I haven't seen him for a while. I'm trying to get him on the golf course, but he's kind of hiding from me right now.
You can't blame me, Phil. I know you get hot out there, so I'm waiting for it to heat up before we play again.
Oh yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I really, really appreciate it. And when John and I talk about trying to get people out, I'm thinking, who might be fun to talk to about the game, and all the times that you and I are together, we talk about not just the current game, but the game itself and how it's evolved. And, here we're talking to a guy that's 63 years, Phil, 64 years.
Yeah. I started in 1956 in Jamestown, New York. That was my first year with the Tigers. It was a Class D league and called the Pony League at that time. And of course, they don't have Class D anymore. But that's where I started.
So, Phil, on that team, how many pitchers did you guys have on that team?
We carried about 8 pitchers, and kind of an interesting thing, Terry. I grew up in Michigan on a little farm. I never had a uniform on in baseball till I was in high school. I threw against the barn with my brother. I built my own mound, threw some rubber balls against the barn, made a little thing there, and then went into high school, and then went to Western for a year. And then at 19 years old, I went to Jamestown, New York. And I think this is one of the major differences in baseball today as compared to then. I pitched 229 innings that first year, 19 years old, and won 17 games. But I stayed there all year. They didn't move me. The Tigers didn't move me. And then the next year I went to Durham, pitched there again a lot of innings. Went to Birmingham, pitched a lot of innings there again. Went to winter ball after that year, 1958, and pitched all winter there. So, they really didn't put the restrictions on you back then as they do now. And I think it's a little bit of a problem. There's a lot of reasons probably why you have arm problems. I think. And today, if I watch them on television a lot. In fact, I talked to Steve Matz the other day a little bit about some things, and one of the things that Dr. Andrews said, the great arm doctor, that one of the main reasons for arm operations today is the bad mechanics, and I don't see them talking too much about bad mechanics. You get a lot of iPads behind the mount, and they'll say your horizontal rotation is bad, your vertical rotation is not good, but they don't tell them why it's not good. And I think that's a little bit of a problem today in today's pitching.
Phil, we had on the show Dave Wallace, Rick Honeycutt. We were trying to get Danny Worthington on. We had some connection issues, but they both said exactly the same thing. So in today's game with the pitching stuff, you've got all of these so-called pitching schools around the country who are teaching velocity, the driveline guys, and, they're teaching velocity. So you sending high school kids and college kids out to, throw the ball as hard as they can. Where does it start? When is it going to be that all of a sudden the mechanics have to be better? I mean, are we going to just continue getting guys hurt? Where do you think the line has to be drawn to where we start teaching better mechanics as pitching coaches?
I think you got a problem, Terry, when you start getting rid of all the people in baseball that know mechanics or that know the fundamentals of baseball, and hire people that are very good at computers and iPads and things like that, but really don't get into the mechanics of how to get the pitch there, and the training. I always tell a story about, I don't know if you guys like history, but George Patton was during the World War II, and Omar Bradley brought 3 generals in. They were going to had to march 100 miles in winter and meet the Germans in a battle, and during the dead of winter. And he asked the British general, "When can you get your army ready to leave?" And he said, "I can leave in 2 weeks." And he said, "Okay." And then he asked the French general, "When can you leave?" He said, "I can leave in 1 week." And then he asked Patton, "When can you leave?" He said, "I can leave tomorrow." And the guy said, "Why do you think that you can take your army out of a major march you just had and march them 100 miles through the dead of winter and entertain in a major battle?" And he said, "Because I trained them." And I think that's one of the things we need to do today. We got to train our pitchers to how they're going to go. I see the commissioners, whoever said that they're going to maybe have to go 6 innings. Well, 6 innings was a bad game. 20 years ago, it was not a good game. So we got to train them, I think, Terry.
Yeah, I totally agree, Phil. I mean, injuries are going to come. I mean, I had, you brought up Dr. Andrews, who's great doctor, but I spent time with Dr. Job in L.A. when I was primarily director of the Dodgers at the time, and we had a big week-long session out there where we talked about how to keep the condition, how to keep the pitchers in better shape, throwing programs, running programs. We had all of his interns and all of his special guys, his physical therapists, and we had experts on training and stuff. And at the end of this whole thing, Dr. Job came up and he said, "Guys, this has been a great 4 days." He said, "We've shared a lot of information," but he said, I'm just going to tell you one piece of advice, give you one piece of advice. He said, "In all my years dealing with athletics, especially, with professional pitchers or professional baseball players, if they're going to break, they're going to break. No matter what you think you're going to do to avoid it, there's going to be a time where there's only so many bullets and so many, in every before you break." And so I sat there and I thought about it. I'm thinking, the most important thing to do now is to make sure we develop it, we get them in shape slowly, but get them to where they're, where the game becomes easy, so where they don't have to overstrain themselves when it comes to game time. And Dave Wallace brought up in the one show, Philly, where, used to be bullpens where, 50, 60 pitches where you worked on stuff. They're 40 pitches today because they only can throw 70 pitches in a game. So you
That's
can't
true.
waste all of your, and I remember when I was in Japan, they would throw 100 pitch bullpens so that their 125 pitches in a game was easy for them. And the physical conditioning, one of the things I talked with some guys years and years ago, baseball being an anaerobic sport, there's a lot of standing around. So you actually have to keep your legs in good shape or you're going to get tired. And so we ran and nobody runs today. So
That's true.
we've got to, when you talk about training, you worked for 100 and some years that you guys ran and you threw.
A lot.
A lot of it. So you go back to when you started. So you're talking about your starters. How many relievers did you have on those teams?
Well, I think I can even go to the major leagues. In 1966, when I joined the Dodgers, we carried 9 pitchers. We had 4 starters. 3 of them were Hall of Famers, but Koufax, Drysdale, and Sutton and Osteen, all 4 pretty good starters, and we only had 5 guys in the bullpen. And a lot of times, a lot of those guys, like a Jim Brewer, he didn't even hardly pitch. He was a left-handed long man, and he didn't hardly get into any games. But those guys were completing 27, 28 games, 30 games each, and pitching 300 innings. So we only had nine pitchers on our staff.
So did you ever hurt your arm?
Terry, I'm knock on wood. I was very fortunate. I played 17 years and never was on the DL. Never hurt my arm. Never missed a start. Never missed a turn. Pitched 8 days in a row. I don't know. I think it was just fortunate. And I think one thing maybe goes back to I grew up on a farm. I did a lot of hay baling, throwing bales of hay up into the mound, up into the barn, and maybe I strengthened my rotator cuff. I don't know, but I just never had a problem, and I could always pitch a lot.
And I will tell you guys, and I'll tell our audience, the last time I saw Phil on the field was 3 years ago, and he's still throwing batting practice. I don't know what he's at that time.
I was 87 years old. Yeah, it was a funny thing. It was on my birthday, and I was going to throw it here. My wife had invited 30 people out here to Port St. Lucie to do it at the ballpark, and I come home that night, and I got a phone call from New York. Said, "We're flying you to New York in the morning. You're throwing it here in New York." So I went there.
Oh my God, that is just crazy. So Phil, besides all of the years in the summertime, tell everybody, how many years did you go to winter ball?
Oh, Lord. Well, I played several years. I played in Puerto Rico. I played in Nicaragua, winter ball. But then after getting out of baseball as a player and starting into the coaching, I spent like 20 years in Venezuela coaching against you at the Tiburones, the Guaira, and tough man to manage against too. Let me tell you that. He had a good ball club. I was with Caracas. I was there about 20 years. Been to the Dominican for about 7-8 years. I went back. Omar Minaya got me back down there to at La Romana, and the last year I went was a couple of years ago. He went to get the team, the pitchers in shape, and get them ready for the season and start the season. Then I came on back home. Interesting how I got into winter ball is that Cookie Rojas, I was with Seattle, and he needed a pitching coach, and he asked me to come down and be his pitching coach at La Romana in the Dominican Republic. So I went, and then he was not going to manage the next year, and he said, "You should manage this club." And I said, "Well, it depends on the owner." And the owner said, "Yes, we'll have you come back and manage." So then I started. That's how I started managing. But how I got the next year, I sat out a year, and then I went to Escogido, and it was an interesting thing how I got there. I hadn't planned on going to winter ball, and Manny Mota was managing at Escogido in the capital in Santo Domingo, and Don McMahon was going to go with him as his pitching coach. Well, during the course of the season, like in September, I think it was, Don McMahon was throwing batting practice for the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium and fell over with a heart attack and died. And that's how I got to go down there. And then that year, as a pitching coach and Moto was a manager, we started off, we were 3-15. And I was down in the bullpen, and a guy came down and said, the owner wants to see you in the office. And I thought, well, I'm probably going home early. And I got in there, and he said, we want you to take over the team and manage it. And I said, no, I got to call Fred Clare, who was the general manager of the Dodgers, because Moto and I are both with the Dodgers, and we work together. And he said, no, we already called him, and he said for you to do it. And so I did it, and all of a sudden we just caught fire, and we ended up winning that year. Went to the Caribbean Series and won it after being 3-15. Beat Licey, which is a big team in there. We beat them 4 games in the championship series, and the next year our Escogido had a patch on there with 4 fingers thrown out that they beat Licey for 4 straight games. But that's the way I started. And then I stayed there a couple of years. We won again the next year, and then Felipe Lu wanted to manage again. And if you know winter baseball and know Escogido, it's the Alus, because all 3 brothers played for that team, and they're big. And so he came back and managed there. And then I went to the Dodgers sent me to Caracas. That's how I got over there. And we won again. So and then he won again, and we played the Caribbean Series that year was in Miami. So we came to Miami, and we played each other in the Caribbean Series over here in Miami. So, and it just kept going. We won some games. It just kept going back. I tell you a funny thing, though, happened to me in Venezuela. And I don't mean to dominate your whole conversation, but we were practicing at another field other than the stadium there. And the general from the Chavez, who had taken over then as the dictator there, the president, and he came over to me, and Chavez loved baseball, and he'd go to Cuba and pitch against Castro in simulated games and stuff like that. And he said to me, Chavez sent me here to tell you he wants to pitch against you. I said, really? I said, you tell him I'll pitch against him, but he ain't winning. I'm not going to let him win. But I enjoyed my time. I had some interesting things when Chavez took over. I was at the Anaco Hilton. I was standing out on the balcony that morning, and I saw the planes coming over. The tanks were marching into the city. They were bombing the palace, and it was quite an exciting time at that
Yeah,
year.
if you remember, I was coaching third for you, and I saw you, and I'm going to tell the people watching, you pulled the greatest managerial move I ever seen in the history of baseball. Do you remember that field the night you took out the left fielder with the tying run at third base, with 1 out? Yeah. You called time and took out your left fielder, put in a new left fielder, and the next guy up hit a fly ball to left field, and he threw the runner out at home plate there. The greatest managerial move I have ever seen.
Well, yeah, I remember that. There was you could do some things there. I was kind of, I didn't let guys wear sunglasses. They'd wear them, and I didn't let them wear behind. You couldn't do that today in today's game. It's a totally different game, but I enjoyed it.
Those are the kind of things, though, that led for you getting that Baltimore Orioles job. From winter ball, managing making those moves in winter ball, and they all worked. You weren't all those games down there. It was incredible. Bill, did you manage in the United States in the minor leagues at all before you got that job?
I never other than college. I never managed in the United States before I got that job. I managed down there. I was down there a lot of years before I got that job. They brought me in and interviewed me, and it was kind of an interesting thing because sometimes you make mistakes in this game, as you know, Terry, in decisions that you make. But the Texas Rangers had wanted me to come to Texas after I left Baltimore to go there and manage and interview for that job. Well, I got to Baltimore, and they said we're going to give you a 2-year contract, and the money was pretty good. Now here's a guy I'd never managed before in America, and they're offering me a 2-year contract. So I was thinking, do I go and interview in Texas or do I take this job? I took the job. I probably should have went to Texas. But I'll go back even further than that. Fred Clare, I did a lot of advanced scouting for him for like 10 years, and he put me down in winter ball, and he liked me. And he told me once, Tommy's not going to be managing here forever. and which I knew. But anyway, the Marlins had just come into existence that for their first year, and Dave Dombrowski was the general manager. Cookie Rojas was his right hand man, and Cookie called me and asked me to come and interview for that expansion job. And I told Fred, I called Fred and said, they invited me to come and interview for the Marlins job, and he said, well, Phil, I want to tell you again, you can do it, but I'm going to tell you again, Tommy won't be here forever. And I'm thinking, I'd like to manage the Dodgers. And you know what I'm talking about, Terry. And so I turned it down. And the next year, after I went to Baltimore, Dodgers hired me to manage their AAA club. And Tommy did resign after he had that heart attack or whatever it was. Bill Russell took over, and he won. He qualified, so they named him interim manager for the rest of the year. And he won, so the next year they named him the manager. And I was at Albuquerque, and I said, well, I really don't want to stay in the minor leagues. So, I could have had that Miami job. I thought I was going to get the Dodger job, but I didn't get it. And, you those are things you make, and you look back and say, I should have went to Texas.
Phil, one of the things that made your nickname, the Vulture, tell us how that came to be.
Well, there was an article just on someone sent me on the internet the other day where one of the great games in history was Koufax and Bunning were pitching a game in L.A. and they went 12 innings, and Koufax struck out 16 guys. Jim Bunning, who I'd played with in Detroit, a great pitcher, and he struck out 12 guys, and they were tied. So I came in and pitched one inning, and we scored a run. I got the win. And the next game that Koufax pitched was in Pittsburgh, and he went 8 innings, and they took him out for a pinch hitter, and the score was tied. I come in, pitched one, and we got the win. We scored a run. I got the win. So I had 2 wins like that, and I walked in the clubhouse, and he's standing there. He said, Regan, you're a real vulture getting my wins. Well, that's the way it started. Of course, by him saying it, I think it made it even, how it stuck. But I had the zoo in L.A. want to come out and put a live vulture in the bullpen and chain it up there. So we had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah,
and I still get cards that people want me to sign the vulture.
Do you really?
Yeah, 30, 40 years ago. 50 years ago, maybe.
Those are some of the great things that years ago. And I know what you're saying. I mean, I had Sandy come out one time and talk to my pitchers when I was managing the Angels. And they asked him, and they said, how'd you get ready for the season? He said, well, I pitched 9 innings twice in spring training, and you should have saw their jaws drop. Like, you did what?
Yeah.
Sandy said,
well,
you got to get ready because I'm going 9. He said, I'm going 9 when the season starts.
Well, the year that he and Drysdale held out all spring, trying. I guess they were trying to get 100. I don't know how much they were trying to get, $100,000. But it was kind of an amazing thing because that's how Sutton made that club, because he got to pitch a lot. I was going to be a relief pitcher, but I got to start a lot down there. And so the season started, and now they joined us in Arizona. And Sandy went out and pitched 4 or 5 innings, and then started, the next day in a couple of days in L.A. And but that's how I became a relief pitcher. Walt Olson told me, he said, we got Sutton here. We don't want him to relieve. He's only 20 years old. We're going to let him start a couple of games, but if he doesn't pitch well, he's going back to Seattle, and then we're going to start you. So my first game I come in, I relieved Koufax and pitched. He pitched about 3, and I pitched about 4 or 5 as a long man. And he said, now we're going to try him in short relief, and Sutton started winning, and I stayed in the bullpen. That's how I became a relief pitcher.
So, John, I know you've got questions for Phil. Go ahead and jump in.
I do. Phil, I'm going to go back to 1969, if that's okay. You remember the Chicago Cubs at that time, and you pitched under manager Leo Durocher. The Mets and the Cubs battled that year for the first ever NL Eastern title. The Mets eventually became the Miracle Mets and won. uh, that series and went on to win the World Series. As a member of that heavily favored Cubs team, what was the feeling among the team about the 1969 Mets? Talk to us about that season and the rivalry at that time between the Cubs and the New York Mets.
Okay. Well, to go even further, after I got out of baseball and came back and joined the Mets, I went into the minor league clubhouse and I looked up there and it said 1969 World Champions. I thought, oh no, the first thing come back, I'm haunted by that again. But but we had a great team in Chicago, and with Santo, Banks, and Beckert, and Kessinger, and Fergie, and Kenny Holzman. We had a tremendous team, and we got off to a good start. And Leo was Leo. I loved Leo. I liked him a lot, but some of the players didn't care for him a lot. But he was a little bit different. But he was tough. But I liked him. And he was very, very good manager. And as we went along, we were rolling along. I think we had like a 9-game lead over the Mets at that time, going into September. And I can remember calling home, and with 25 games to go, we had a 5-game lead. And my wife had said, "Do you think you're going to win?" I said, "Gee, we got a 5-game lead with 20. If we don't win, we don't deserve it." And but all of a sudden, I think the game that really killed us, we got beat in St. Louis like 2-1 or 3-2. I forget the score. And that day in Pittsburgh, the Mets won a doubleheader, 1-0 and 1-0, and the pitchers in both games drove in the winning run.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Don
right?
Cardwell was one of the pitchers. Yeah, I remember that.
And so you begin to say, "Hey, they won like 28 out of 30," and we just kind of collapsed a little bit. I think one of the things that maybe happened to us a little bit was we had those eight or nine good players, and Leo really played them every day, and there is a difference playing in Chicago every day in the daytime in the heat as against playing, say, in LA or New York, where you play some games at night and it's a little bit cooler. And I think by September our team was really, really, really dragging. We were missing fly balls and ground balls, and pitchers weren't pitching. And but I know this. I pitched in 70 games in LA and never got tired. But at the end of the '69 season in Chicago and in the daylight, it was you were tired. I tell you an interesting story. He stood out in left field one day with Ernie Banks, and who was always positive. I always tried to get him to say something negative, and he never would. And I said to him one day, we're standing there and we're sweating just standing there. And I said, "Ernie, don't you think it's just too hot to play baseball today?" And he looked at me and he said, "Phil, it'd be a lot hotter if it was out picking cotton, wouldn't it?" I said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, it would be." But you could never get him to say anything. A negative guy. What a great person. But I think the whole thing came down to the team got tired, and we didn't have a lot of reserves, and they played every day. And at the end, I think they were tired.
Yeah, you did have one named Jimmy Qualls who broke up Seaver's perfect game July 9th in '69.
Line drive over shortstop in left center field.
Yep.
I still see it.
That was crazy. And there were a lot of, very historic games that year. And the one that stands out to me a little bit that I just wanted to get your opinion on, especially with Leo Durocher, was the September game. Agee came up, got brushed back, and then Jerry Koosman hit Santo. And that was the game. There was a black cat that made it onto the field and stopped right in front of Leo and looked at him and ran away, and everyone made a big deal of it. Well, that's it. It's a sign. It's a jinx. What did you and the Cubs think of that crazy night in 1969 with the black cat?
Yeah, I remember that. Now I'm going to tell you a story about that too.
Okay.
Jim Hickman was one of our players, and Jim Hickman was from Tennessee, Henning, Tennessee. I don't know if you've been there. It's a real small town in Tennessee. It's where the guy that wrote Roots, that was his hometown. That's where he wrote the story, Roots. So Jim Hickman, died a few years ago, and I went back down there to his funeral, and this fellow said, "Would you like me to show you around Henning, Tennessee?" I said, "Yeah." Jim used to we roomed together for 6 years, so he used to always talk about Ripley and Henning, Tennessee. I said, yeah, I'd like to go see it. So he took me to the, it started at the courthouse, a real small town. He said, this was all built by slave labor back a long time ago. But as we pulled up there, a black cat ran up the steps. This is the honest truth. I'm not kidding you. He ran up the steps. And I said, hey, look at that. And he knew the story. So he said, what else would you like to see? And I said, I'd like to go to Jim Hickman's house because he told me the story about his dad had this big pecan tree in his backyard. And he said, this year, Phil, he made $800 selling those pecans off that tree. And I said, well, I'd like to go to his house and just see his house. Incidentally, we walked up to the door and introduced myself to the owner, a new owner. And I said, and I told him a story about the pecan tree. He said, really? He said, I'm going to start selling. I've been giving those away, But anyway, as we walked around to go to this tree, a black cat ran by the tree. Now, within an hour, less than an hour, I saw 2 black cats in Henning, Tennessee. I think it might have been Hickman, the jinx. I don't know. If he's around today, I'd call him and tell him. But that was a black cat.
Wow. Wanted to take you back to 2019. While as a pitching coach for the Mets, the New York Post covered how you would leave a note on the team's bulletin board every day. Some of these notes included phrases like, yesterday's home run won't win a game today, and a mosquito never got a pat on the back until he started to work. So talk to us a little bit about using this form of kind of unorthodox messaging to the pitching staff that year.
Well, I did, and had an interesting one of the reserve kids that wasn't playing much. He said, I come to the clubhouse every day just to read the quote that you got up on the board. I got another one for you. The guy said, Vince Lombardi said, you never get to the top of a mountain by falling there. You got to climb, boys. but it was just something to get them going. And I remember one where I talked about you got to go out in the field and get the cows; they won't come home, And Jake DeGrom loved that one. That was one of his favorite ones that he loved. But I just tried to get him a little conversation going with me each day and give him something to think about. Yeah.
And do you still keep in touch with a lot of the guys, a lot of the pitchers that you worked with, especially on the Mets side, for example?
Yes, I do. And Seth Lugo called me about a week ago, just before the All-Star game. He said, Phil, I'm an All-Star. I was so happy because I had him down here in St. Lucie and took him, through the minor leagues and was with him in New York. Steven Matz, DeGrom, we talked quite a bit. Yeah. In fact, I just talked to Matz the other day. I had some film of him down here when about 3 years ago, he'd had a bad year and he'd come down here and he wanted to spend a week down here in the minor leagues, and we worked. And then he got traded and went to Toronto, won 14 games. And I had some nice video of him, how he was throwing. And they sent him back down, I think, to work on some stuff in St. Louis. So I called him. I said, I hope you don't think I'm out of line, but I want to send you this picture. Just look at it. He said, yeah, send it to me. So I sent it to him, and he said, yeah, I see it now. I see what I was doing. So maybe it helped him. I don't know.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He lives in the same town as I do here in Franklin, Tennessee. So
in Tennessee,
yeah. Got to know his wife a little bit, who's in the inspirational band with her siblings. But yeah, Phil, I really appreciate it. I'm going to throw it back to Terry. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are great stories, Phil. I mean, my gosh, of course, you told me some of them before, but they're still fun to listen to anyway. So Phil, I want to talk about some of the new ones that's up, what's going on today in the big leagues, the new rules. Do you still watch a lot of games?
Yeah, I watch a game almost every night. I get the cable here, and somewhere along the line, I watch a game almost every night. Yeah.
What rules? What are the rules? Some of the new rules that you like, and what are some of the rules you don't like of the game today?
Well, at first, I didn't like the speed up, where the pitcher didn't have time. But I went to a few minor league games out here, and the games were so much quicker that I thought, well, maybe they're not all bad. Maybe that's not all bad. A lot of pitchers don't like it because they think it hurries them up a little bit, But sometimes it works for them. Terry, some pitchers work fast, some others take their time. So It probably, but those are some of the things that I don't really care for. Uh, the where you have to bring a guy in. This is tough managing, I think, where you bring a relief pitcher in and he has to face three hitters or something like that, and that's a tough thing because it takes away your specialty. Where you're a manager and you got maybe you're looking at a guy over there and you see they're either going to bring the right hander or the left hander in, and then you could even and you don't have that choice now to make that move to get a left hander out or to get a right hand hitter out. I think that's a bad rule personally. I don't care for that one. Other than that, there's I often wonder who's making these rules. I don't think there's any pitchers on that committee that's making them because they all seem to be against the pitcher. But whatever.
I think you're right. That should be out because it all starts. They're trying to speed the game up. That's basically what it is. They talk about the new age fan today. They're so busy with so many things now that they don't have 3 hours to sit there. But it's taken the strategy away from the game. I had a pitcher who pitched for me named Jerry Blevins for a number of years, and this guy for 3 years, he had 75 appearances, and and most of them were one guy. He got the toughest left-handed hitter on that other team out a lot of times. Sometimes he did, but for the most part, that's what made him special, And so now he's got to come in the game, and now he has to face that big left-handed hitter. He may get him out, but now he's got to face two more guys. So tomorrow night, I might not have him.
There you go. That's exactly
strategy
right.
away, and that part to me is that's where I think the game. But I'll tell you something, Phil. I watch a lot of games too. I've got the same stuff. I got the MLB where I can watch all the games. But anybody that goes extra innings, I turn it off. I'm not watching a guy who hasn't been on base for 2 days. Now all of a sudden go stand on second base and score the winning run. I'm not watching that. Just like you just talked about. Here you are, you got Sandy going 12 innings, strikes out 16 guys, and you come in, and all of a sudden now there's a guy standing at second base. I mean, those are the kind of things I'm thinking, who enjoys that? Who enjoys that?
Yeah.
And I remember a few years ago that I had heard a rumor that there's a possibility that they were going to have the manager hit whoever he wanted in extra innings because in baseball, the star player sometimes never has any effect on extra innings because if he's hitting second and you lead off the 10th inning with your number 6 hitter, he may not have any impact on the game. And the whole thing was the fans love to see the star player. So it's, but that was always part of the game. That's what made the game a thinking man's game where you had to manage. I mean, that's
right.
We had to manage the game, and now it's pretty much taking it out of our hands.
I'll give you a little insight on that man at second base because that always bugged me too. And so about a year ago, I asked the pitchers with the Mets, I said, what would you rather have? It's an unearned run against them if that run scores, but they get the loss.
Right.
I said, wouldn't you rather have an earned run and not the loss? I said, oh no, we'd rather have the loss because we get paid on earned average. I said, I want to tell you something. I got to laugh. In 50 years from now, when I check your record, I'm going to see that loss. I don't know if it's an earned run or not, but I know you lost the game. That's what I see. But they would rather take the loss and not the earned run. It's an interesting thing. The other rules I don't like, Terry, is the catcher can't stand there and block home plate like Socha used to do. You can't slide into second base. I saw an out the other day. The game ended where the shortstop came in. The guy went back to second base, and they called him out for. They ended the game on that an interference call. You probably saw it. I mean, there was no interference, and I don't know how they got that, but there's a lot of different rules today. It's hard sometimes to throw it at hitters now like they used to because you're going to get into a fight probably and get thrown out of the game anyway. So the rules have changed. The game has changed. There's no doubt, and I'm not always sure it's for the better.
Bill, did you ever play anything on your fingers to get a better grip when you were pitching?
Oh no, I wouldn't.
Never
do
did
that. Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you that story. I know you've been looking for it. I was in Chicago and came in to pitch, and Chris Pellicudis was the umpire. Pete Rose was the hitter. It wasn't my favorite player anyway. But anyway, I struck him out, and Pellicudis said, no pitch. Going to let him hit again. I said, why? He said, because of the rotation on the ball, we think it was an illegal pitch. So they come out, they took my hat off, and they rubbed they checked me all over. They couldn't find anything. And they let him hit again. He got a base hit. Somebody wrote the other day, he should have one less hit on his record than he's got, the hit king, because he got that hit after I struck him out. Now Mac Jones, the center fielder, came up left-hand hitter, hit a fly ball to center field. They called him back, said no pitch, illegal pitch because it was because of the rotation on the ball. Let him hit again. He flied out. I had to get him out 3 different times, but I did. And so at the end of the game, they called 14 illegal pitches. And Randy Hundley was the catcher, and we got in the clubhouse afterward, and we figured they missed 3. But that happened in the game, in the major league game.
Oh, well,
the president of the league.
I go to today, and I'd like to talk to some of these hitters, and especially as everybody's throwing so hard now, and guys are pitching inside. We're seeing guys get hit, breaking their hands, and everything else. Yeah. And I always wanted to just ask them, would you rather have that, or would you rather have that pitcher get a little bit better command of that fastball with a little something on his hands that he can now locate that pitch a little bit better? What would you like? We had one hitter, Phil, a few years ago, who came up, said, hey, look, Garrett Cole's doctoring the baseball, and so we got to look at it. So all of a sudden they've changed rules because of one guy, and now guys are getting hurt right and left because they're getting hit, 100-mile-an-hour pitches.
Yeah. Well, it's a changed game. There's no doubt about it, and I don't know if it's better.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time coming on the show. Love to see you. We'll be playing golf here very soon.
All right. I'm waiting for you. I'm getting ready.
Good.
He's a good golfer. Everybody doesn't want to know Terry Collins. He's competitive, and he's a good golfer.
The challenge has been made.
All right.
Phil, thank you so much. We'll hook up, right. And it was just a blast having you on, and can't wait to get out and see you.
Thank you. Good seeing you, all you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Terry, great stories with Phil. Wow, what a history, as we talked about before the interview started. Amazing.
He's an amazing guy. John still is today, 85 years old. This guy's active. He plays a lot of golf. If I could walk out tomorrow, if I'd let him, he'd be throwing batting practice over on one of the fields over at the camp with the Mets. So tremendous guy, knowledgeable, one of the great pitching coaches in the game today. And if you're a pitcher, and if you can't listen to what Phil Regan has to say, your chances of getting better are slimmer.
Well, great having him on this week's show. Now it's time for the Tunnel to Towers amazing Hero of the Week segment. Let's go to that right now.
It always came down to protect the innocent. That was his passion. I had very few memories of the day my husband died, but I recall very well the time we got home from the hospital. My son questioned me, Mom, are we going to be able to keep the house? Are you going to have to go back to work? A home not only means everything to me, but it clearly means a lot to, my children.
To the family of Detective Joseph Seals, we are going to pay your mortgage. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is going to pay your mortgage before Christmas, so you never have to worry about your mortgage again.
It's truly unexplainable. Them paying the mortgage of my mortgage, it truly laid a foundation, and it allows me to continue this journey, which is raising kids by myself. Hearing us say our home, that it's ours, and we don't have to pay, a penny towards it after, the foundation took care of it. It's such a relief, and in my case, it's one less thing for me to think at night. Tunnel to Towers and their work, it gives me hope. I do consider them my family. I have a lot of not blood related family members. They're my team.
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is going to pay every mortgage of every police officer throughout this great country every single time from this day forward. Join us in supporting our nation's heroes and their families now. It only takes $11 a month to make a positive impact. Go to T2T.org now.
We'll have another T2T Amazing Hero on next week's show. And Terry, that's going to about wrap it up for this week. You can follow Terry on X and Instagram at TerryCollins_10. For those of you on Facebook, there is a page there as well for the Terry Collins Show. You can follow me on X and Instagram at John Arezzi. And make sure to subscribe now to the Terry Collins Show on your favorite podcast platform. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, this is John Arezzi for Terry Collins. Have a great week, everyone.